Today we discuss the biography of a famous personality, Pablo Picasso. So listen carefully. The Spanish painter, sculptor, and graphic artist Pablo Picasso was one of the most productive and revolutionary artists in the history of Western paintings. As the central figure in developing Cubism, he established the basis for abstract art. We should know the early life of Pablo Picasso. Pablo Ruiz Picasso was born on October 25 in 1881 in Malaga, Spain. He was the eldest and only son with two younger sisters, Lola and Concepcion. His father, Jose Ruiz Blasco, was a professor in the School of Arts and Crafts. Pablo's mother was Maria Ruiz Picasso. It is rumored that Picasso learned to draw before he could speak. As a child, his father frequently took him to bullfights, and one of his earlier paintings was a scene from a bullfight. In 1891, the family moved to La Coruna, where at the age of 14, Picasso began studying at the School of Fine Art. Under the academic instruction of his father, he developed his artistic talent at an extraordinary rate. When the family moved to Barcelona, Spain in 1896, Picasso easily gained entrance to the School of Fine Arts. A year later, he was admitted as an advanced student at the Royal Academy of San Fernando in Madrid, Spain. He demonstrated his remarkable ability by completing in one day an entrance examination for which an entire month was permitted. Picasso soon found the atmosphere at the Academy stifling, and he returned to Barcelona, where he began to study historical and contemporary art on his own. At that time, Barcelona was the most vital cultural center in Spain, and Picasso quickly joined the group of poets, painters, and writers who gathered at the famous cafe Els Quarter Gats. Between 1900 and 1903, Picasso stayed alternately in Paris, France, and Barcelona. He had his first one-man exhibition in Paris in 1901. Next, we should know Paris at the turn of the 20th century. At the turn of the 20th century, Paris was the center of the international art world. In painting, it was the birthplace of the Impressionist painters who depicted the appearance of objects by means of dabs or strokes of unmixed color in order to create the look of actual reflected light. While their works retained uncertain links with the visible world, they exhibited a decided tendency forward flatness and abstraction. Picasso set up a permanent studio in Paris in 1904. His studio soon became a gathering place for the city's most modern artists, writers, and patrons. Picasso's early work reveals a creative pattern which continued throughout his long career. Between 1900 and 1906, he worked through nearly every major style of contemporary painting. In doing so, his own work changed with extraordinary quickness. Next, we should know blue and pink periods. The years between 1901 and 1904 were known as Picasso's Blue Period. Nearly all of his works were executed in somber shades of blue and contained lean, melancholy, and introspective figures. Two outstanding examples of Blue Period are the Old Guitarist 1903 and Life 1903. In the second half of 1904, Picasso's style took a new direction. In these paintings, the color became more natural, delicate, and tender in its range, with reddish and pink tones dominating the works. Thus, this period was called his pink period. The most celebrated example of pink period is the family of salty banquets. Picasso's work between 1900 and 1905 was generally flat, emphasizing and the two-dimensional character of the painting surface. Late in 1905, however, they became increasingly interested in pictorial volume. This interest seems to have been influenced by the late paintings of Paul Cézanne. The phase of portrait of Gutenstein in 1906 reveals still another new interest. Its mask-like abstraction was inspired by Liberian sculpture, an exhibition of which Picasso had seen at the Louvre in Paris in the spring of 1906. This influence reached its fullest expression a year later in one of the most revolutionary pictures of Picasso's entire career, Les Domiciles d'Avignon in 1907. Next, we should know Picasso and Cubism. Les Domiciles d'Avignon is generally regarded as the first Cubist painting. The faces of the figures are seen from both front and profile positions at the same time. Between 1907 and 1911, Picasso continued to break apart the visible world into increasingly small facets of monochromatic planes of space. In doing so, his work became more and more abstract. Representation gradually vanished from his paintings until it became an end in itself. For the first time in the history of Western art, the growth of his process is evident in all of Picasso's works between 1907 and 1911. Some of the most outstanding pictorial examples of the development are Fruit Dish 1909, Portrait of Ambroise Vollard 1910, and Majoli, also known as Woman with a Guitar. Next, we should know collages and further development. About 1911, Picasso and Georges Barcoux began to introduce letters and scraps of newspaper into their cubist paintings, thus creating an entirely new medium. The Cubist collage, Picasso's first and probably his most celebrated collage, is still life with chair canning 1911 to 1912. After Picasso experimented with the new medium of collage, he returned more intensively to painting. In his Three Musicians 1921, the plane became broader, more simplified, and more colorful in its richness of feeling and balance of formal elements. The Three Musicians represents a classical expression of Cubism. Next, we should know additional achievements of Picasso. Picasso also created a sculpture and prints throughout his long career and made numerous important contributions to both media. He periodically worked in ceramics and designed sets, curtains, and interior for the theaters. In painting, even the development of Cubism fails to define Picasso's genius. About 1915 and again in the early 1920s, he turned away from abstraction and produced drawings and paintings in realistic and serenely beautifully classical style. One of the most famous of these works is The Woman in White in 1923, painted just 2 years after The Three Musicians. The quiet and unboastic elegance of this masterpiece testifies to the ease with which Picasso could express himself pictorially. Next, we should know about Guernica, one of Picasso's most celebrated paintings of the 1930s is Guernica. This work had been commissioned for the Spanish government building at the Paris World's Fair. It depicts the destruction by bombing of the town at Guernica during the Spanish Civil War military revolt against the Spanish government. The artist's deep feeling about the work and about the massacre which inspired it are reflected in the fact that he completed the work that is more than 25 feet wide and 11 feet high within 6 or 7 weeks. Guernica is an extraordinary monument within the history of modern art, executed entirely in black, white, and gray. It projects of an image of pain, suffering, and brutality that has few parallels. Picasso applied that pictorial language of Cubism to a subject that springs directly from social and political awareness. Next, we should know Picasso's politics. Pablo Picasso also declared publicly in 1947 that he was a communist. When he was asked why he was a communist, he stated, "When I was a boy in Spain, I was very poor and aware of how poor people had to live. I learned that the communists were for the poor people that were enough to know, so I became for the communists. But sometimes the communist cause was not as keen to Picasso as Picasso was about being a communist." In 1953 portrait he painted of Joseph Stalin caused an uproar in the Communist Party's leadership. The Soviet government banished his work. Although Picasso had been in exile from his native Spain since the 1939 victory of General Francisco Franco, gave 800 to 900 of his earliest works to the city and people of Barcelona. To display these works, the Palacio Angular was renamed the Picasso Museum and the works were moved inside. But because of Franco's dislike for Picasso, Picasso's name never appeared on the museum. Picasso was married twice, first to dancer Olga Noklova and then to Jacqueline Rocco. He had 4 children. He was planning an exhibit of over 200 of his works at the Avignon Arts Festival in France when he died at his 35-room hilltop villa of Notre Dame de Vie in Morgins, France on April 8, 1973. The discovery of Cubism represents Picasso's most important achievement in the history of 20th century art. Throughout his life, he exhibited a remarkable genius for sculpture, graphics, and ceramics, as well as paintings. He is one of the most celebrated artists